When someone starts to feel your presence as a constant in their life, their emotional response to you becomes stable, sometimes even flat. It's not because they don't care, but because the human brain adapts. When we give someone a steady stream of attention, affection, or excitement, their emotional system adjusts to it. It becomes their baseline. And when something becomes baseline, it no longer stands out. The key to making someone miss you deeply is not about disappearing dramatically or playing childish games. It's about understanding emotional contrast. Think about your favorite song. If it played in the background every second of your day, after a while you'd stop noticing it. But if you heard it at just the right moment, unexpectedly, it would hit you hard. The same psychological principle applies to attraction and connection. When you consistently give emotional highs, laughter, deep conversations, warmth, or excitement, you create a memorable experience. But if you never create space, those highs lose their impact. When instead you allow moments of distance after giving those highs, that gap is what makes someone feel your absence on a deeper, emotional level. They don't consciously think, she's doing this intentionally. All they feel is a sudden emotional drop compared to what they were feeling moments ago, and their mind automatically starts searching for the source of that shift, you. That's emotional contrast at work. Most people do the opposite. They sense that someone enjoys their company, and they respond by giving more, texting more often, initiating every conversation, always being available, constantly trying to keep the vibe going. But in doing that, they flatten the emotional experience. They never allow contrast, so the person never truly gets the chance to miss them. It's like constantly keeping the music on at full volume. It stops feeling special and just becomes noise. The powerful shift happens when you give an amazing emotional experience, and then, rather than dragging it out, you gracefully step back. You end the conversation while the energy is high. You leave the call while both of you are still smiling. You don't stay out until the energy dies down. You leave when the night is at its peak. This is what makes the next moment of silence noticeable. It's not cold or manipulative. It's emotionally intelligent. You're not pulling away to punish. You're creating the space that allows emotional impact to linger. When you do this right, you plant a subtle imprint in someone's mind. They're going about their day, and suddenly they feel that little emptiness. They remember your laugh, your vibe, your energy. It's not because you chased them into remembering. It's because you gave them a taste of something real and then allowed the space for that taste to sink in. That contrast between the emotional high they experienced with you and the quiet moment after is what creates longing. This approach also shows confidence. You're not afraid of space. You don't cling to constant communication to keep the connection alive. You trust that your presence is memorable enough that it doesn't need to be forced. And ironically, that trust is what makes your presence even more magnetic. People are drawn to those who know how to give energy, but also know when to hold back. So instead of thinking, how can I make him miss me? Shift your mindset to, how can I create moments that stand out and then give them room to breathe? That emotional rhythm, the rise and fall, is what naturally makes someone's mind circle back to you, sometimes without them even realizing why. That's the quiet power of emotional contrast. Predictability is comforting at first, but over time, it dulls emotional excitement. When someone knows exactly how and when you'll respond, exactly what to expect from you, and exactly how every interaction will unfold, their brain stops being curious. And curiosity is the spark that fuels longing. If you want someone to miss you without even understanding why, you need to gently break the pattern of predictability that often forms in early connections. It's not about becoming distant or playing cold games. It's about reintroducing a sense of unpredictability that keeps emotional attention alive. Most people unknowingly fall into a rhythm that feels too scripted. They reply at the same time every day, send good morning and good night messages like clockwork, and always initiate conversations the same way. At first, This consistency feels warm and reassuring, but after a while, it loses its emotional impact. It's like watching the same scene over and over again. No matter how good it is, repetition makes it fade into the background. What creates emotional pull is when moments with you feel fresh, alive, and slightly unpredictable, when there's just enough variety that the person doesn't fully know what's coming next. Imagine someone always being the first to text. The other person gets used to it, starts expecting it, and eventually, the absence of that message doesn't hit emotionally because it's become routine. But if one day you don't send that message and instead appear later with a vibrant, unexpected energy, it breaks the rhythm. The other person's brain notices the gap, wonders why, and their emotional attention turns back toward you. This slight disruption wakes up their curiosity. They don't consciously think, she's being unpredictable. What they feel is a subtle shift that makes them more aware of your presence and absence. This isn't about being inconsistent in your character. It's about keeping the dynamic from becoming stale. You remain genuine, kind, and engaging, but you stop operating like a schedule. You might sometimes be the first to reach out, sometimes wait. Sometimes end a conversation first, sometimes stay a little longer. You vary the rhythm, not the core of who you are. That unpredictability doesn't confuse, it intrigues. It makes every interaction feel less like a pattern and more like a moment worth paying attention to. When someone can't fully anticipate your every move, they become more emotionally alert in your presence. They listen more closely. They think more deeply about your responses. They notice the silence. This heightened awareness is exactly what creates that lingering feeling of, I miss her, even if they can't articulate why. Their emotional system is responding to the fact that being around you doesn't feel mechanical, it feels alive. Another powerful effect of removing predictability is that it prevents your value from being taken for granted. When your time, attention, and energy follow a predictable loop, they start to feel like a guarantee rather than a gift. But when you gently disrupt that loop, the person starts to value those moments more. They realize, even subconsciously, that your presence is something special, not something to be expected on demand. This doesn't mean playing hard to get or manufacturing fake distance. The goal isn't manipulation. It's emotional authenticity with healthy variety. You're simply showing that your life doesn't revolve around being endlessly available. You're showing that your world is dynamic and that anyone lucky enough to have your attention gets to experience something real, not robotic. By breaking patterns, you bring freshness back into the connection. You reawaken curiosity, and curiosity leads to emotional engagement. That engagement is what makes someone find themselves missing you during the quiet moments, wondering what you're up to, and anticipating the next interaction. And that's exactly where you want their mind to be, not bored by routine, but alive with a subtle sense of intrigue. One of the most magnetic shifts you can make is to stop pouring all your emotional energy into trying to make someone think about you, and instead channel that energy back into yourself. This isn't about pretending to be busy or faking confidence. It's about genuinely building a life that is so full, meaningful, and vibrant that your presence carries weight even in your absence. When you invest in your own energy, you naturally create a pull. People are drawn to individuals who have something bigger going on in their lives than just waiting for a message or a call. In the early stages of connection, it's easy to unconsciously hand over too much emotional power. You start adjusting your schedule around them, checking your phone constantly, making yourself readily available at every moment. While this might feel like devotion, what it often communicates, without you realizing it, is that your world revolves around theirs. And when someone senses that your emotional center has shifted entirely onto them, they stop being curious about you. They stop leaning in. It's not because they're cruel. It's because your energy no longer carries the same self-respecting balance that initially attracted them. When you redirect your energy back into yourself, your goals, passions, friendships, self-growth, you begin to glow differently. Your conversations become richer because they're not just about the connection, they're about your life, your experiences, your ambitions. Your presence starts to feel layered, interesting, and alive. You stop being emotionally dependent on their responses to feel good, which ironically makes your presence feel more grounded and valuable. People sense when someone has their own rhythm, and they're drawn to it because it signals confidence and self-worth. Think about the difference between someone who constantly waits for validation and someone who wakes up with purpose, works on their passions, nurtures their friendships, and has personal goals they're excited about. The second person has an energy that doesn't demand attention. It attracts it. When you become that person, you don't need to do extra things to make someone miss you. Your absence is naturally felt because you're not clinging, you're living. Another powerful element of investing in yourself is that it resets the emotional dynamic. When your energy is centered on you, you stop over-giving. You don't chase conversations or force interactions. You're not available every single time they reach out, not because you're playing games, but because your life is genuinely full. This subtly communicates that being part of your world is a privilege, not a guarantee. And when someone senses that, their appreciation grows. They become more aware of your time and more thoughtful about their interactions with you. It also protects your emotional well-being. When you rely entirely on someone else's attention to feel valued, you give them control over your emotional highs and lows. But when your energy is grounded in your own life, you stay balanced. Whether they text or not, whether they call or don't, your world doesn't fall apart. That stability makes you more emotionally attractive because it shows you're not looking for someone to complete you. You're inviting them to complement an already fulfilling life. This self-investment doesn't push people away. It draws the right ones closer. When someone sees you growing, glowing, and thriving, they naturally start to think about you more. They wonder what you're doing. They feel your absence, not because you're intentionally withholding, but because your presence is strong and meaningful. You stop being the person constantly reaching out and instead become the person whose life is worth reaching into. So instead of asking, how can I get him to miss me? A more powerful question is, how can I make my own life so fulfilling that anyone who experiences it wants to come back for more? When your energy is invested in yourself, missing you becomes effortless for them because your presence carries a rare kind of value, the kind that isn't manufactured but earned through self-respect and growth. One of the most subtle but powerful ways to make someone think about you long after you're gone is to leave them with an unfinished emotional moment. This doesn't mean playing games or creating artificial drama. It's about understanding the psychology of how the mind responds to emotional highs and open loops. When a conversation, a moment, or an interaction ends on a warm, meaningful, or high energy note rather than fizzling out, the mind lingers on it. It replays it. It wonders what could have followed. That's what keeps you present in someone's thoughts without you having to chase their attention. Most people make the mistake of dragging out interactions until they lose their spark. They stay in the conversation until it gets quiet and awkward. They keep texting even when the vibe has naturally peaked and the energy starts to dip. What happens then is that the emotional impact of that interaction fades. Instead of leaving the other person with the feeling of, I can't wait to talk to her again, it leaves them with a neutral, sometimes even tired emotional imprint. But if you can learn to step away while the energy is still alive, while both of you are laughing, feeling connected, or sharing a meaningful moment, you create a lingering sensation. It's like ending a movie at the perfect moment, leaving the audience wanting more. This concept of emotional timing isn't about manipulation, it's about emotional intelligence. Imagine you're having an amazing conversation, full of humor and warmth. instead of waiting until it drifts into, "So what else is up?" territory. You gracefully say, "I have to run, but this was fun," with a smile or a light-hearted note. That moment becomes emotionally sticky because it ends with a spark. It leaves the other person with a psychological open loop. They subconsciously want to continue that feeling. And when they can't, because you've already stepped away, their mind starts to revisit the moment later. That's how missing you begins to take root without you saying or doing anything extra. This principle applies to any interaction: calls, dates, texts, even casual encounters. If you leave them with a sense of, "I wish this moment had lasted a little longer," you're creating a space in their mind where curiosity and longing can grow. It's the same reason a good story often ends on a cliffhanger. Our brains are wired to seek resolution. By stepping away at the right time, you let that natural curiosity do the work for you. Another benefit of ending interactions on a high note is that it subtly raises your value in their mind. When you don't overstay in emotional spaces, you show confidence. You show that you're not afraid to leave some moments open. You trust that the connection was strong enough to hold its own without you needing to constantly feed it. This confidence is magnetic. It makes the other person not only think about you more, but also associate you with uplifting emotional experiences. Think about the difference between a conversation that ends with forced small talk versus one that ends with both of you smiling, maybe even laughing, as you say goodbye. The second one lingers. They might find themselves replaying your last words or the way you looked in that moment. That emotional residue sticks around because it wasn't resolved. It was paused at a peak. This approach doesn't mean you have to plan every goodbye perfectly. It simply means becoming aware of the emotional rhythm of your interactions and choosing to exit at moments that leave a positive emotional mark. It's not about controlling the other person. It's about understanding human psychology and using it with sincerity. When you master the art of leaving moments unfinished at just the right time, you don't have to constantly remind someone of your value. The moment does it for you. Their mind naturally fills in the space you left, wondering what would have happened next, when they'll talk to you again, or why the memory of that moment feels so strong. And that's how missing you happens organically, not through pressure, but through timing and emotional intelligence. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they want someone to miss them is confusing attention with access. They think that if they give more of their time, respond faster, and make themselves constantly available, it will make the other person value them more. In reality, it often has the opposite effect. When your presence becomes too easy to access, it starts to lose its emotional weight. But when you learn to control access, not in a manipulative way, but in a self-respecting and balanced way, you naturally increase your value in their mind. It's not about withholding love or playing games. It's about creating a dynamic where your presence feels special, not guaranteed. Think about how we react to things that are always available versus things that feel exclusive. When something is always within reach, we tend to take it for granted without even realizing it. But when something requires a bit more intentional effort to experience, we value it more. The same applies to emotional availability. If you're always the one initiating, always replying instantly, always ready to drop everything, the other person subconsciously registers your presence as constant. And constant things, no matter how beautiful, stop standing out. But if your time and energy are given thoughtfully, not endlessly, it communicates that being around you is meaningful. This doesn't mean ignoring someone or playing hard to get. It simply means setting healthy boundaries and not giving away all of your emotional energy at once. For example, if you're in the middle of something important, you don't have to drop it to respond immediately. You can reply later with warmth and presence. If you've been talking for hours, it's okay to wrap up the conversation first instead of always waiting for them to do it. These small shifts show that your life is full, your attention is valuable, and you respect your own time. That quiet confidence makes people more aware of the moments they do get with you. Controlling access also means being mindful of how much emotional energy you give in interactions. When someone feels like they have unlimited access to your time, emotional support, and attention, they can start to lean back emotionally. They don't feel the need to invest the same way because they sense you'll always be there. But when your presence is balanced, it naturally encourages them to step forward. They start to value the time you give. They become more intentional in their efforts. It shifts the dynamic from you chasing to a balanced mutual exchange. This is especially powerful in communication. If you respond to every message immediately, it creates a rhythm where they know they'll always get your attention on demand. But if sometimes your responses come after you've lived your life a little, after a workout, work, or spending time with friends, it shows that your world doesn't pause for anyone. That kind of independence isn't cold, it's attractive. It shows that you have a strong sense of self, and that makes your presence feel rarer and more valued. When someone senses that access to you is earned through meaningful connection, not just handed out without thought, their emotional focus shifts. They start noticing when you're not around. They start to anticipate your replies instead of expecting them. They look forward to conversations instead of assuming they'll always happen. This is how missing you starts to happen naturally, not because you forced distance, but because you created healthy emotional space. What's beautiful about this shift is that it doesn't require acting different or pretending to be someone you're not. It simply requires you to live your life with self-respect and clarity. You don't have to announce boundaries, you live them. And when you do, people feel it. They sense that your time is meaningful, your attention is earned, and your presence is something worth holding on to. That quiet power makes someone miss you more deeply than any game or strategy ever could. Silence can be far more powerful than constant communication when it comes to making someone feel your absence. Many people panic at the idea of silence, thinking that if they don't keep the conversation going, the other person will forget them or lose interest. But in reality, it's often in those quiet spaces that emotional connections deepen. When you allow silence to exist intentionally, you give the other person's mind the room to process, reflect, and feel. Instead of filling every gap with words or check-ins, you let the emotional investment they've already made rise to the surface. That's when they begin to miss you. Not because you pushed them to, but because their own emotions catch up to them. When you constantly send messages, call, or look for ways to stay on their radar, you don't give their mind a chance to notice your absence. You're always there, so there's no contrast, no space for longing to build. But when you step back and allow a bit of silence after meaningful interactions, something shifts. Their brain starts to replay the last conversation, think about your energy, or wonder what you're up to. This natural curiosity is what creates emotional pull. You're not forcing it, you're letting it happen. Think of silence like the pause in a song. If music never had breaks, it would feel chaotic and overwhelming. The moments of quiet are what give the melody room to breathe and make the notes stand out. In a connection, silence does the same thing. It makes the moments you do share feel more significant because they're not drowned out by constant noise. It creates anticipation and reflection. Instead of racing to fill every gap, you're allowing the emotional rhythm to play out. Another important part of this is trusting silence. Many people use constant communication as a way to soothe their own insecurities. They worry that if they don't text back quickly or keep things alive, the other person will lose interest. But that fear often leads to overcompensation, too many messages, too much availability, too little mystery. When you learn to be comfortable with silence, you communicate something very different: confidence. You're showing that you trust the connection enough not to babysit it. You believe that the emotional moments you shared were meaningful enough to stand on their own. Silence also gives the other person a chance to contribute more. When you're the one always initiating, always keeping the momentum, they don't get the opportunity to step forward. But when you create space, you allow them to feel the desire to reach out. You give them the room to miss your presence and act on it. That shift often surprises people because the moment they stop over-communicating, they start to receive more genuine attention in return. It's not because they suddenly became more interesting, it's because they stopped crowding the emotional space. Strategic silence doesn't mean ghosting or playing cold. It means allowing moments to breathe. After a great conversation, you don't need to follow up instantly with more messages. After a fun date, you don't have to fill the next day with constant check-ins. You trust that the moment spoke for itself. You let their mind do the work of replaying and remembering. The beauty of silence is that it works beneath the surface. While words can sometimes feel forced or strategic, silence allows feelings to grow naturally. When someone lies in bed at night and suddenly thinks of your laugh, your presence, or a specific moment that doesn't happen because of your 20th message of the day, it happens because you gave them the space to feel it. That's the kind of emotional impact that makes someone miss you without even realizing why. When you master silence, you stop chasing attention. You stop trying to control the pace of someone else's emotions. Instead, you create an environment where missing you becomes inevitable. It's quiet, it's powerful, and it often speaks louder than any words ever could.